Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Unraveler Show with your host, Alan Bondar, and my special guest tonight's Jamin Coller. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah. Good
Excellent. Job. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So grateful that you're on here. And I got you from Michael. So I don't know anything about you, but I'm super excited to get to know you. And so what I love to do is get to know my new friends, my guests live, so that other people can get to know you at the same time. And because I find a lot of times, you talk behind the scenes, you waste all the good stuff.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
So this is a great chance. So Jamin, I grew up in a Christian home. I was a Christian my whole life. I was a pastor, did the whole 9 yards. Eventually, just one day woke up, and that's kind of my story in a very brief way. Wrote a whole book on it called "How to Kill God the Easy Way." And working on a second edition right now with a brand new title that will be more palatable for people to hand to their friends. Right. Turns out that title doesn't really go over too well with a lot of people.
Right.
Although I would have read it, that was kind of up my alley. But it is. That's short of my story. What about you? How did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, well, okay. So I also don't know anything about you, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation based on your intro video and that little snippet of your life. There's a lot of overlap there. I was a pastor's kid and went through seminary and all that stuff. Was a worship pastor for, really from age about 16 until probably way younger than I should have been until almost 40. So basically, my whole life was in. What it's funny.
Sorry, did you say almost 40?
Yeah.
Bro, I thought you were in your 20s. Holy crap.
Thanks. See, I like you even more now.
Jeez, bro. What are you drinking, man? I gotta give myself some of that.
So I'm 43. 39 was the last time I was in my parents' church. And so my dad was a pastor, and in fact, my dad was if you're old enough, like I am, to know the movie Thief in the Night, that was like a Christian blockbuster.
Got a whole section of that in my book, man. They freaked us out with that.
Oh, okay, awesome. So my dad is the pastor from that movie who was telling his friends that they all need to get saved, and then he gets raptured while he's mowing the lawn. That's my dad. He wasn't an actor. He was just the dude. Like he was a piano playing pastor in the movie. He was a piano playing pastor in real life. He was worried about the rapture and wanted to tell all of his friends about it in the movie, and that's what he wanted to do in real life. So that's kind of like maybe the backdrop for my life in a little tiny snippet too. So lots and lots and lots of years. And then, so you describe your situation as waking up. And I don't know that I had like a moment for mine. I was in an environment where I knew that I wasn't allowed to ask certain questions. You learned that. And if you're in it deep enough, like I am, I learned it from, age. I think the youngest I can remember, like having a question that I remember getting shot down, and in a way that was like, there was more of a point to it than the conversation itself, somewhere around 5 or 6. And then there were I'd say at least half a dozen other points that I can pin down. I remember the conversations between there and about 13, 14, 15, where, the cynic would say that I was being, molded or learned helplessness or manipulated, gaslighted, all that stuff. I think they were just really honestly concerned for I think they were being sincere. If you really believe this stuff, then it looks a lot like gaslighting and all the other things that, narcissism and all the nasty labels that you want to put on it, because, eternity's at stake. You don't mess around with that stuff. So I learned in that household that certain things weren't allowed to be asked. But for some reason, I was just blessed or cursed or something with the personality that couldn't put them away as easily as, for example, my brother could. For some things you can just say, oh, okay, I don't understand that. It doesn't have to make sense. It could be the opposite of what seems to be true. And I'm good with that. I'll learn more about that when I get to heaven and then carry on. And for me, they just sat on the shelf, but they were still on the shelf, And so then you keep putting enough stuff on the shelf and eventually the shelf is going to break. And so that was kind of my experience. I can't really point to any one point, and I can't even really point to a specific point where the shelf broke. But I do know that things eventually got big enough that it's at a certain point when I was 39, there was definitely a point at which I let my dad know that I wasn't going to be attending his church anymore. And then through a series of nasty events, but over the next 4 months, basically I got excommunicated from not only my family. I haven't talked to them since April of 2020, and all the rest of my friends and stuff. And they all said, "You're disgusting. We don't ever want to talk to you again. Don't contact us." And so at that point, I went through a whole, depression and personal crisis. But then after I got through that a little bit more, I kind of decided, okay, well, I've got all these things I've got this shelf of things that I wasn't allowed to ask, or else I would lose all my friends and my family and my job and my everything. Well, I already lost all that. So let's pick up one of those. Go ahead and take a look at it. And I expected to find out how ignorant I was of, the real meaning of scripture and all the stuff that I'd been told. They're Christian professionals out there. They're apologists that are smart guys. And they've got answers for this stuff. And so unfortunately I trusted that was true. And so I went looking for the answers. And of course, I mean, anyone who's been down that path, you know how that goes. You don't get the answers. You only get more questions, and then you get answers that were in the opposite of the direction you hoped. And, things fall apart at the rate at which I think you have faith, because I think it's pretty strong. And so I believe that there were answers. And so I didn't feel like there was any danger in asking a lot of questions really quickly. And I think if you're more timid about that stuff, like, people in my farmer community, or perhaps my brother or something was, then you go at those questions more cautiously, and maybe you deconstruct a little bit slower. But if you really think there are answers and you're not afraid of the answers, you're going to get all the answers that you don't want.
Right. No, I mean, all that makes sense. Very, very similar to how I would describe my story if I were to be going through detail. But was there not a moment that you realized almost out loud to yourself, or if not screaming in your head, where you were like, I just don't believe this anymore? How did that come about for you? Like,
yeah. Well, okay, so Chesterton's fence analogy of you find a fence in the middle of nowhere. The conservative says, let's not take it down until we find out what it's here for, and the liberal says it's in our way, let's take it down. I'm very much a conservative in that way. Like I'm cautious about getting rid of structures that have been there for a long time without a lot of consideration of the unintended consequences. Because I think that's if we have whatever the opposite of a superpower is, if we have a super Achilles heel in our species, it is not realizing the unintended consequences of things, and treating complex systems as if they were just complicated systems. And so I feel like perhaps some things of my religion were that way. I think that religion perhaps, I don't know. I can't go back and find out, but I think it might have kept me from some really bad things in my life. I've had a pretty good life. And I attributed all of it to God before. And I think that, having, it might be that I was already gonna, not have a kid before wedlock, or I was already going to graduate high school, or I was already going to do, whatever the markers are of, like, a nice, easy life. Maybe it's just because I'm white. Maybe that's all I needed. And none of it has to do with God at all. But I don't trust that I know those things. And so I'm open to the idea that perhaps Christianity did some good in my life. Which is not, a real popular sentence in the deconstructionist or atheist community. But I just don't trust myself to know that.
Sure. No, I think that's fair. I mean, truth be told, how can you possibly know one way or the other?
Right.
I couldn't possibly say Christianity definitely didn't do any good for my life,
but
I also have no way to know that Islam wouldn't have done the same thing for me, or
absolutely, or Mormonism. Mormons are better than anybody at it. Yeah,
exactly, or nothing at all. No religion. We literally don't know. And I think that's one of the things that I've come to learn as an atheist now is just the best answer oftentimes is just I don't know.
Right.
And I think that's what makes theists become theists, is they're not comfortable with the I don't know answer, and they have to fill the gap and feel like there must be a conclusion to this question. So we're gonna leap to God. And that's why I am now an atheist, not because I'm declaring there is no God.
Right.
I'm simply saying I see no evidence for a God.
Right.
And so I'm comfortable with I don't know. Like,
right.
I don't know is okay. It's much better than just making up an answer.
So, right.
So I appreciate that. I appreciate that insight, because you're right. It could very well be. So back to my question, trying to understand your timeline. So, like, when did you realize that. So first of all, I guess
Yeah.
I may ask this question: would you characterize yourself as an atheist?
So yeah, I I'm gonna hedge on this one, and I know everybody hates that, but I would say it depends on who I talk to. If Richard Dawkins can call himself a cultural Christian, then I get to use part of the word Christian too. Like I definitely have a Christian mindset. When I Yeah, in so many ways. I was gonna give an example, but there's too many of them. So like having spent 39 years in like deeply in Christianity, there's so much of my default position that is like throughout my day, just scriptures come up, Christian songs come up. I find myself singing Christian songs that I don't want to sing and that I don't believe in and that I think are damaging, but it was a catchy tune and it was there for decades. So like in that way, like any atheist that was hanging out with me would think that I was a Christian, not because of what I believe, but just because it's in me. And so when I'm around Christians, I can fit in pretty well. A lot of what they say really irks me. But as far as my beliefs, I think I'm very much, at least intellectually and philosophically, on your what sounds like the like Matt Dillahunty esque atheist experience, kind of
Yep.
like I just don't know. And I'm not cool with leaping to your answer because there's too many people who want me to leap to their answer that I can't pick one. So I'm not going to pick one. I just don't know. Um, so yeah, as far as my beliefs, any Christian who could like peek inside my head would definitely call me an atheist. But any atheist who hung out with me would definitely call me a Christian. And that's what I found in all of my interviews is like I go on any atheist channel and do an interview, and they all like, oh, this guy, he's eventually going to become a real atheist, but he's still a Christian. He just doesn't know it. And I go on all the Christian channels, and they're like, oh, why do you even have this guy on? He's obviously not a Christian. He's obviously an atheist. Like, all right, like I'm Jamin. I don't know what that means. I don't
Right.
know that.
And frankly, I mean, I could care less how you choose to live your life.
Yeah,
That it has no bearing on what your belief is about God. It
right.
just means that you, as Jamin, determines to live his life by the way he chooses to live,
Yep.
and that's fine. I don't think a God has anything to do with that. And so, I guess just knowing that you would classify yourself then as an atheist, at least philosophically
Sure.
speaking, that just helps clarify for me going forward here as we talk. Now, I would consider myself an atheist and an agnostic both.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
because as an atheist, I'm not declaring there isn't a God. I'm just simply
Right.
saying I see no evidence. So
Hmm.
my default position is I don't know there's a God. I don't really have any reason to. As an agnostic, I'm willing to say, look, there's so much out there I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know anything about this God, even if there was a God. There's like
Yeah.
so much. So
Right.
there's just I'm okay with being both.
Yeah.
And so one is about belief, one is about knowledge, right?
Hmm.
I don't believe there's a God as an atheist. I
Right.
don't know that there's a God that agnostic. So that leads me to my question then. At what point was there a point? How would you say that you knew you're now an atheist? Like, did you ever
Yeah.
have a moment where you're like, I think I'm an atheist?
Right. Yes. So it's funny that you asked the question that way because I think there were definitely points where I realized I'm not a Christian. I don't think there was any point I realized I was an atheist, and maybe that's a sign of not a true atheist, or whatever other Scotsman you want to throw in there. But
Sure.
like, yeah, there was. In my search at some point I had some questions about the Jewish tradition, as of course you would as a Christian, because we're told what the Jews believe, and they're straw manned so that we can easily dismiss them, because we believe that Jesus was the Messiah. But then of course there's the annoying question that we've had since Paul of like, why don't the Jews accept the Messiah then, if they're the ones that most want him and most need him and have the most evidence for him? So I went to a Jewish synagogue and talked to a rabbi, and a lot of things fell apart at that point. And I don't know where I wasn't in my journey, but there were a lot of places there where I went, oh, I've been, I can't help but feel, at least emotionally, I feel like I've been lied to. And I think that all of the people who were teaching me were just wildly ignorant about the Jewish positions. But it definitely felt like I was lied to. And I was like, oh, I don't know anything about these guys. And all the stuff that I've been told about the Jews isn't true. And of course, I'm not a Jew. I didn't convert to Judaism, but I did realize, oh, all the stuff that we had built on this lies of the foundational lies about who the Jews are and why they believe what they believe and why the Pharisees were bad and all that stuff, that was all bogus. So everything that's on top of that tumbled pretty much at once. And that was a lot of stuff. I mean, that is the Jew that is the Messiah. Like once you don't have your Messiah, you kind of don't have your Christ-based Christianity.
Right. Right. Well, it's interesting you say that because I found that even from denomination to denomination, as I journeyed in my, my Christian life, um, I also found the lies being told about other denominations that
Oh yeah,
they're not saved because blah,
right,
whatever. And we know this about, and they knew nothing about the other
no,
denomination
right.
at all because they never even took the time to
Hmm.
understand it. But it's,
Hmm.
they believe in that water saves you stuff,
Yeah.
like whatever,
Hmm.
just like,
Yep.
so I mean that's just been the journey. It's been nonstop. But I sounding a lot like you. I was always skeptical, and I was never content with the whole. Well, we don't need to pay attention to that. Man, you say that to me. That's the only thing I think
Mhm.
about.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
I got to get to the bottom. Like, why are you saying that? What are you so scared of?
Right.
Funny thing you mentioned Matt Dillahunty. I listen to him a lot. I really
Yeah.
like Matt. I mean, I think he loses his temper real quick, but he's very,
Yeah.
very smart.
Uh-huh.
So I try to work with work with his material without the temper part.
Yeah.
But somebody had oh man, where was I even going with that? Um, I don't know. I even lost my train of thought just even
Yeah.
commenting on that.
So, if so, you're told not to think about something. That's all you can think about, and uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Geez, man, there was a show I was just listening to not too long ago. That was leading that comment was going to, but it's
Yeah.
not a here
Okay.
nor there. I'm just gonna forget it because I'll be spending the next 5 minutes being like,
I'll come back up.
I don't know. Anyway, there was a point in time though that even though like coming to the conclusion that you're an atheist may have been more progressive, but you knew there was a moment where you thought I'm not a Christian anymore, right?
Yes, because there's those list of things you're not allowed to think, and so once you think those, and you're not just playing a game, because I'd play the game of like, okay, but let's say that whatever, I would test it out. Like, what if, for example, Job is like just a story? What if he wasn't a real guy? And you could play those games as a Christian and still stay Christian. And so, okay, well, so maybe some of the less, like maybe Job isn't an inspired book. Maybe that one isn't supposed to be a part of the canon, or you can play these games and still stay pretty much Christian. But there's certain things you're not allowed to actually really think. And so if you play the game of like, okay, well, what if Jesus wasn't the Messiah? Um, if you think that too hard to the point at which you feel it, you don't feel like a Christian anymore. So yeah, there were several of those that were like, oh, like, or the Bible wasn't inspired, which you can like, for me at least, the path to that was like, I think that perhaps there are some contradictions in the Bible, which sounds like a silly sentence now, but there's tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people right now who really believe that that's a crazy,
Right.
sentence. So it's just so hard to get emotionally back to where I used to be. So anyway, at that point, you're like, okay, well, maybe one of these wasn't actually a part of the canon. And then once that starts to fall apart, you realize, okay, well, maybe none of this was actually inspired, infallible, or what's the other I? Inspired, infallible, and inerrant. Um, maybe these are just books written by dudes. And then like the unfortunate that like I think that for me the single greatest feeling of deconstruction is when things start to make sense. Like when you leave your Christian worldview and then things click into place. Because if you think that thought like, okay, well, maybe none of these books were actually written by God, and it's like, oh, well, that would solve the problem of all of the genocide, and that would solve the problem of the rapes and all these terrible things that God commanded that I've been working to like mold my Christianity around. Well, that was the Old Testament, and all these things that we try to come up with explanations for that don't really fit, and then all of a sudden stuff fits. Like, oh yeah, people just wrote this, and so that's this like the I think the grief part for a lot of people is realizing, oh, this all actually makes way more sense outside of Christianity than it does inside of Christianity. That's a bummer, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I definitely understand the grief part. For me, I had that bookshelf problem too.
Hmm.
But I never realized I had a bookshelf problem.
Yeah,
I
of
never really
course.
thought twice about it. I always just looked for solving the puzzle and always
Hmm.
kept within the matrix of Christianity to
Yep.
solve the puzzle. Um, and I think I just got to a point one day. For me, it was prayer. It was
Hmm.
kind of like the last straw for me. Um, where I was out on a prayer walk and just it was like almost, it was the weirdest feeling. Like I had all these other things that I never wanted to actually realize were
Mhm.
not, were not true.
Yep.
And then like this moment, I was like, who am I talking to?
Yeah,
And
right.
and for me, especially being a full preterist, I don't know if you're familiar with what full preterism is.
Nope.
It's the Latin word preterism, means past fulfilled. So it's the view that believes all the prophecies were fulfilled in Scripture
Okay.
by 70 A.D. at the destruction of Jerusalem.
Okay, cool. We just call
So
that a good Christian. I didn't
we
know there
call
was
that a good.
another.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that view gets you kicked out of a lot of churches. It's
Okay.
considered heresy. But anyway, so as a full preterist, everything, all the benefits you get as a Christian are all spiritual.
Mhm.
They're not tangible in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, wait, hang
Everything,
on. Just to make
yeah,
sure I understand, you're saying that there are no future prophecies.
correct.
Oh, no, that's a bad Christian. Sorry.
That's a
Okay,
bad
I'm with
Christian.
you
Yes,
now. Okay, yeah.
that's a bad spanking.
Okay.
That's a bad Christian.
Okay.
No
All right.
good. So yeah, and I still to this day think that's the best interpretation of the Bible,
Okay.
which is also one of the reasons why I think Christianity is entirely flawed, because it doesn't actually fully make sense of the Bible. It's the best option we have of
Okay.
interpretation of the Bible. Um, but that being said, so I really like, as a full preterist, all of your hopes, everything is just based in this spiritualized idea.
Uh-huh.
Like all of your benefits are things that are nothing but faith. Everything's
Mhm.
just, you just have to believe you have
Yeah,
this.
right.
You just have to believe you have this. Well,
Mhm.
what does it really do for me? Well, you just have to believe you have it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's got to this point, and then even the fulfillments. I mean, even all the prophecy fulfillments are all just, you just have to believe they happen.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, minus the destruction of Jerusalem, which was the prophecy that supposedly fulfilled all of these other things that gave us these benefits. Um, so for me, I was at a point where, I was on this prayer walk, and where I was like, who am I talking to? And the reason it didn't matter to me, like all of a sudden I just woke up, because I was like,
Mm.
well, and what are these benefits I'm supposedly get? Nothing in this religion is benefiting me. There's nothing that makes any sense
Mm.
here.
Yeah,
And I'm talking to myself, really, for all intents and purposes, because
right.
I have a very similar story to you, in that I had already lost my church. I had already
Mhm.
been divorced. I had already lost a lot of friends.
Yeah.
I was already coming out of a depression that I was already in for, a couple of years,
Wow.
really bad one.
Yeah.
My life just fell apart, but that was before atheism. I was still
Yeah.
a diehard Christian. And for all
Right.
intents and purposes, even coming out of that depression, I had every intent that I was going to start another church.
Yes, right.
So so for me, that moment was just, it was catastrophic. It was
Yeah.
like literally my whole world fell apart.
Yeah.
Even though it had already fallen apart,
Yep.
the world that I had internally, that I believed that there was this God,
Yes.
bro, when I lost that God, like
Yeah.
like that day, I literally said to myself out loud on that walk, I said, I think I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
And I wept. I
Yeah.
just wept and
Yep.
wept and
Yeah.
wept, because bro, that was painful.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember that very, very distinctly, but it was a process that I didn't even realize was happening, almost like a chick, growing
Yeah.
inside the egg,
Yeah.
and then boom, you hatch. And you didn't
Yep.
everyone out in the world thinks they just hatched, but there's a
Yeah.
whole lot
Right.
going on behind that.
Yep.
So that was my so that's kind of why I was trying to figure out what was the point where you realized it.
Yeah.
What was that catalyst for you that made you say, yeah, I'm done with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as you can probably tell, I still don't know that I am done with it.
Okay.
So for example, this is embarrassing. This is silly, but a little peek into my life. I still pray. And I don't think that there's a God. So, but after I left, I've been doing a lot of different types of yoga and meditation and stuff, and affirmations and stuff. And I realized I'm not talking to anyone. Like, I'm just talking to myself. This is the same exact thing as prayer, except I already have this, like, I already know how to pray. I did that for years, and it was very soothing for me, to give my cares to God, like to not have them anymore. And there were lots of great things I got out of that. And now I'm working really hard to not use that format for the exact same thing. Like, I've got all these affirmations that are, tell me about that I'm enough and that things are going to be okay, and trying to deal with all the anxiety and stuff. And I realized, oh, well, I already know how to do all this stuff. And so nowadays, at least for now, I'm trying it out. When I get the urge to pray, I just pray. And of course, Christians just love that. They're gonna think that, that's just proof that,
Of course they do.
God is still drawing me or whatever. And that's fine. They can think that. I just know that, like, I already built the structure. Like, I already worked on this skill for 40 years. I got the skill of meditation. We just called it prayer, and we thought there was a dude on the other end of it. But I'm way better at that than I am at meditation. So I still meditate every day. But then also, if I'm feeling really anxious about something and I realize that I'm carrying something that I shouldn't carry because there's nothing I can do about it, we're in the process of moving or whatever, and like I just all the anxiety that goes with all getting all the pieces, and I can't do anything about it. Then I'm sorry to say this on your channel, but I just give it to God. And it makes me feel better. And I feel like, well, God used me for all those years. I should get to use him now. Like, that seems fair.
That does seem fair. That does seem absolutely fair. A lot of people would just change the terminology and say that you're speaking to the universe or to energy or whatever.
Yeah.
What you call my partner, Ray, she also did not have the upbringing that I had or that you had. So she doesn't have the trigger attachments to these words that I have, like God, to her, it doesn't have the same impact. And me, it makes me cringe now. Cause like, it was a mind virus that trapped me for 40 years and made me do stupid things that I wish I never wasted my time on,
Right.
But for her, it's not, so she has no problem saying God, much like you do. But for me, it's like, I cringe. Like, do you have to call it God? Can we call it what it is?
Right.
But it's fine. I mean, it doesn't. I'm trying to come around, but I guess it just depends on who you're talking to, and you just need to define terms and realize what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The way you're describing it, it's not some infinite superior personal being. It's more that you're just speaking it into the air to say, hey, I need to get rid of this because it makes me feel better to do it. And that's cool. I have no problem with that. In fact, if you think about it, all we ever did, like you said earlier, was talk to ourselves anyway.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I, even in my book, I make this comment, like, the good news is you don't have to stop talking to yourself. You can keep praying to yourself if you want to, because the strength's always been inside you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You literally have gone. Okay. So I don't remember if this was the connection I was making earlier, but it may connect to the Matt thing again. I don't know, but coming through my depression, like, I realized on the other end that there was no God there taking me through any of that. Like, I can like if anybody, if any Christian were to journey with me through that 3 years, 4 years of working through all of that movement, from being depressed, losing God, all that stuff, if they were to actually see and travel in my mind to know how much I poured my heart out to God and begged him to show himself, to heal me, to help me, anything, just God, please. I would go to Christian counselors and they would give me these awful advice. It would just crush me more and depress me more because I'm such a horrible person that just didn't do what God wanted, bro. And all that, and yet God never once came through to reveal himself to a broken reed, or a bruised reed, whatever. And that text in the Bible, God will never break a bruised reed. And yet here I am, right? Somebody who gave my life to him for 40 years, begging him to do something in my heart to just make me feel his presence and silence. I mean, that, like, and then they say, well, you just didn't do enough, or you didn't pray enough, or you didn't blah enough and blah enough. And I'm like, what is enough? I mean, like, you would think God would know my breaking point, and yet he did not know it well enough to stop me from breaking. It frustrates me so much when Christians act like you were never a Christian to begin with. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yes, this is the thesis of my whole entire second book. So I wrote one that was just about my own deconstruction.
What's it about? Tell us.
So my second, the first one is just it's what you would expect from someone who spent 40 years and then deconstructed. It's all my list of, like, here's what I learned from the rabbis, and then here's what I learned from So it's all the reasons that I personally can't believe. But then my second book. So I originally wrote that one and I called it Dear Evangelicals, because I still thought at the point that I started writing it that there were answers, but I just couldn't find anyone who would give me the answers. And so I was like, please help me out. Here's my list of problems. I want to get saved. Ready, go. And then I realized, like, as it got longer and longer and longer, no no evangelicals were actually going to read that book, because they read that you have questions about God, and then, oh, I get it, this guy just wants to follow his own sinful desires, and then they write you off. And so,
right, that's
right.
always the freaking answer.
I know. Yes. Well, in their defense, what you and I are saying can't be true. Like, whatever the case is, it can't be that Alan actually sincerely asked God to come through and then God didn't come through. That's impossible. So
Right.
all I'm left with is Alan's a liar. And if it's
Right.
either God's a liar or Alan's a liar, and my life is built on God not being a liar, sorry, Alan, but you're going to be collateral damage.
Yep.
So I mean, and
It's
it's evil. It's horrible. They're doing damage. They're doing more damage than good in so many cases. So I'm not trying to defend them at all. I'm just saying I think every human put in that position, if it's your life or their life, you're going to give up their life. And
dude,
so
that's brilliant. You're absolutely on point. That's brilliant. Good insight.
So that was my second book was after I realized, oh, no one's going to read this, because that's when I was starting to realize, oh, I'm not really a Christian. Then I wrote the book that was actually to evangelicals, where I don't deconstruct any theology, but I just try to give them the perspective of what it feels like to deconstruct. And so I don't talk about any of the problems with the theology. I just say, here's what it feels like to go through this process, and here's what the people who are leaving your church and who are about to leave your church, I call them pre-former members, like they're people sitting in your church who are currently feeling this way and they're about to go, and you could keep them if you knew what was inside of them. But as soon as they ask a question, the church usually spits back, well, then you were never really saved, or you don't have enough faith, or give all the reasons. If you say that to them, they're going to feel defensive and they're going to leave. So here's their actual experience. And it's just a call to empathy for people who are running into a legitimate faith crisis without actually causing anyone to go into a faith crisis. Just because it seems to be like your story, my story. It's the story of like anyone who did this in a church, because they can't afford for our complaints to be illegitimate. If what we're saying is true about us, then what they know about God can't also be true. So it sucks, but like I don't know another way around that except to start to build a little bit of empathy, which they can do when it's someone else's religion. Like they can see a Mormon who like, oh wait, Joseph Smith was a polygamist, and like all the stories are like, oh no, what's happening to my worldview? And they can see someone like deconstruct out of Mormonism, and then to have the church hate them and reject them. Like they can look at that and go, oh, that church isn't treating them nicely. But when that exact same thing happens inside their church, it's just like reflexive. And so anyway, I'm experimenting right now with is it possible for the church to find what I would call love, but I'll call empathy, since they believe that they already have love.
Right. What's the name of your book? Your second book?
Dear Evangelicals.
So the first one was
is now called If I'm Really Honest: The Transparent Thought Life of a Reluctant Deconstructionist.
So if we're gonna find, because I want to put these in the
thanks.
People can find. So first one's called If I Was say again
If I'm Really Honest.
If I'm really honest, and then the subtitle, which was long.
Yeah, right.
And that's okay. I mean, I wasn't like criticizing it. I wanted people to remember the main title. I can find it. If I'm really honest, and the second one is called Dear Evangelicals.
Yes.
All right. Cool. We'll put those in the links, because I want people to definitely take a look at those. That's an interesting concept. I don't know. Okay, so I wonder how possible that is if you are a strict adherent to the text, as opposed to being a church that's more concerned about loving, or the word you used,
empathy. Yeah.
Empathy. Yeah. Thank you. I was going to say compassion. Empathy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I ask that is because if you're a strict adherent, you have the whole Matthew 18 problem.
Yeah. Lots of problems. Yep.
Remove them from the church.
Yep.
Treat them like a tax collector and a pagan.
Yep. John says if they really had been with us, they never would have left, and that's why they left, is because they were never really with us in the first place. So we got tons of verses that say chop them off, get rid of them explicitly.
Right. So and I think all religions do that. Of course, Christians like us, we denied that it was a cult because everybody else is a cult, and that's the one thing Christianity seems to. It's one of the reasons it kept me for so long, is because, well, everyone else is a cult, but we're not.
Yeah, right.
And so you're like, oh, well, okay, I guess we're not the cult,
Mm-hmm.
But that that standard cut them off thing, if they're acting like that,
Yep.
is very reminiscent of any religion,
Yep.
actually. Maybe a few exceptions,
Yeah.
but for the most part,
Yeah.
that's religion in general.
Right.
Um, and it's very, very sad. And so I understand your approach here. It would be nice if you could find a way to get them to empathize and say, hey, these people are just dealing with difficult questions and they're not
Yes.
finding answers, and so they're deconverting. But
Right.
I just don't. I can't imagine, and it's going to work probably for like mega churches or whatever that don't care about the tax as much as they care about empathy.
Okay. Sure.
But I just don't. That's interesting. It's a very interesting. I can't wait to read it. Actually, now I'm very, very fascinated by your approach, because that's kind of cool. If you can pull that off, I think that'd be very good. Because
Oh, yeah.
like for me, like I struggle at all to even think religion should have any place in this world. I mean,
Right.
I'm at a point where I've seen enough atrocities happen
Yes.
through religion
Yep.
that it doesn't really, the benefits don't outweigh the cost in any way, shape, or
Right.
form. That
Yep.
doesn't mean that non-religious sects and belief systems haven't also caused atrocities.
Sure.
Of course they have.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's atheists around the world that have also caused
Yeah.
atrocities. That isn't the concern I have. The concern I have is if in fact this is one system that we could remove that would create less atrocities, that is better for humanity.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at, is like, and because I'm more concerned about truth than I am comfort or empathy, because I think you can have comfort and empathy within truth just as much as you can within falsehood. My thought is, if we get rid of the false versions, you can still produce all the same things religion does, but without religion, and thereby also eliminate all the atrocities that came with it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Do you want me to go shut up my dogs real quick? Can you hear that in the background or no?
I can, but it's not distracting.
Okay. All right.
They're not.
Yes.
I
Okay.
mean,
So
yeah.
yeah. Goodness gracious. Okay. So then yep, it's distracting to me. But yes.
If it is, go ahead. If it is, you can go do it.
No, I'm circling back into the questions. So my hope is that there, I mean, the thing I don't want Christians to find out is that they're not really Christian anyway. Like, you can't take any Christian from today and drop them anywhere in history and have them find a church that they're welcome in. A modern Christian might even not only murder gays like they were commanded to, and never told not to stop that practice. I mean, we have all that stuff of, all the commandments that were given that were never rescinded by Jesus or by anybody else. Not only that, but like they have tattoos. Some of them think that you can go to heaven and smoke or drink. They believe in the Trinity, which originally was not, like, that's not allowed. So there's so many things that the church is right now that it never has been. I see it as this great morphing culture. And so Christianity is better now than it's ever been. And so but what I hope they don't realize is they're not really Christians. You can't take them to anywhere. You can't take them 100 years back, 200 years back, 300, 500 years back. You can't take them back to the early church and drop them and say, hey, find a church to join. This is the early church. This is what you believe that you're a part of. You're just like the early church. You're the only good church that there is. All the other denominations are bad, but you're just like the early church. Go find a church. You're going to get executed for blasphemy, for heresy. Yeah. So Christians today aren't really Christians anyway. Christian is a silly term. It's been this evolving thing. So if you can evolve far enough that you allow tattooed people to go to heaven, and smokers, and maybe even gay people, and perhaps Catholics, like if you got this, if you're allowing such heathens into heaven, maybe you can continue to evolve. And so the way I would want you to evolve is the thing that we would call secular humanism, which is care more about the people than you do about your beliefs, because your beliefs are trash anyway. Your beliefs are these evolving, like it's not a real thing. Your beliefs about Jesus, your your soteriology, your everything about your religion is not what it's ever been. So I just want you to keep going in that direction and keep turning into more and more loving people. Some people are already farther down that road. That's all right. In my from my perspective, Christianity's not going anywhere. And so if it has to be here, and again, I'm conservative about whether or not, like, if we could just like snap our fingers and get rid of all religions. I don't know how that turns out. It might turn out to be a utopia, but it might be hell too. I don't know. I don't know what it's doing right now, but I do know that it is here and it's not going anywhere. And so if it has to be here, I would rather that it be a more loving, compassionate, empathetic, more secular humanist Christianity, because it's already gone so far that direction from where it started. That, I mean, there are no Christians owning slaves right now, and is, despite what they claim, that's not because of Christianity. You know, they got dragged along for that ride, and so they no longer own slaves. And so that's great. Let's just keep going. Unless you guys are going to go away, in which case, you know, that might be a great thing. But I still see a way around. Like, I understand the atheist utopia is that all the damaging religions, which, you know, perhaps might be redundant, is would all go away. But I don't see that happening. So come along. Let's try to get more loving, more compassionate, more understanding, because I don't know another way to get my species farther down that road.
That's a really good insight. I appreciate that. And I think that's good, because while you have the atheists that would love to get rid of religion with the snap of the finger, you're right. It's not going to happen overnight. So in the meantime, it's nice to have a little somebody in the middle here that's like saying, hey, while we're getting rid of this thing, let's learn to love them. In fact, your method may actually help eliminate, because my thing is like, I think that I think faith in itself is a damaging prospect. This whole idea that we just believe things because, well, we don't have another answer, so we're just going to take it on faith. Like,
right.
I think that causes so much damage in the long run, because you're not basing your decisions for life in reality. You're basing it on your personal opinion, is really what it comes down to. You may say, oh, well, yeah, we get it from God or from the Bible. And, you know, the whole objective standard argument, you know, this God's a transcendent center and it must, you know, listen, you're literally, you and 15 other 100,000 Christians are all determining what you think God's objective standard is for your own life.
Right.
And you're not really following some consistent standard. You're just following what you are deciding you want God to be the standard. And so it's literally comes down to the same exact thing that the rest of us are doing. We're deciding how we want to live, which is exactly what you're doing, except you're trying to make it sound like you're following some standard, because it's the only thing you got to make it sound like you've got a faith in something real. But it's not. It's silliness. And when you live like that, especially based on a book like the Bible that condoned things like slavery, rape, murder, pedophilia, stuff like that, you look at this and you're just like, I'm sorry, in what way would we want this God to be our standard? Like,
right.
And so what you end up having Christians do, which you're absolutely right, they've strayed so far away from what real Christianity is, that they're now making up stuff like, well, we don't read the Old Testament that way, or we just disregard the Old Testament, or yeah, we see it, but, you know, we're going to try to find a way to pretend like it doesn't exist and square it some other way. It just becomes obnoxious ad nauseum, you know, just, and so my thought is, like, if we can get rid of that altogether and just get everybody to come back to reality, I have a feeling that if we all become humanists instead of theists, we'd probably spend more time figuring out a way to benefit us more as a race, or not even a race. Race is a bad word. As a, I don't know what the word I'm looking for.
As a species, as a people.
Species. Thank you. That was the word. Yeah. That would be far better, because then it's rooted in truth.
Yeah. Okay.
It's rooted in reality, not some idea out here where I get to make up whatever I want, but I actually have to engage you. I actually have to say, hey, this is what I think. This is what you think.
Right.
Let's dialogue. Let's figure out the best system we can for all of us.
Yeah.
Rather than me saying, God, the Lord said, which literally means I think, and that's all that matters, is, and I'm ruler here today, so you're going to bow to me. That's really what it comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah, yes. I from the outside, 100%.
Yeah.
You and I've both been on the inside, and we've both said those things, and it wasn't because we thought we were trying to be ruler. We thought we were being humble and submitting to God. So we just have a translation issue there. But yes, I see your perspective. I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit more about your upbringing, because you did that
Yeah.
thing that
Okay.
I did, but I've done this a lot of times with people on my show, so they already know me. I want them to get to know you.
Yeah.
40 years, but 39 years, right?
Yep.
So that was when you kind of got out, and
Yep.
so it was more of a progressive thing during that year, because
Oh.
you don't have a day and time like I could, where I could be like, that was the
Oh,
moment,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, and so looking back, I mean, it's I always had my eye on that shelf. Not not because similar to what you said, like it wasn't because I was eager to destroy Christianity, but like, how come I'm not allowed to ask that magic question? Like, why is this question more powerful than other questions? Like, that makes that one really interesting to me. But I understand some things are dangerous. You shouldn't mess around with nukes or whatever. But like, that makes nukes more interesting. And so, but the number of things that were piling up, and then some of them just became ridiculous to me. Like, I Job might have been one of the earlier ones that I can remember. Like, why does Job have to be a literal guy in order for me to get into heaven? Like, and I'm not allowed to ask that, but also I can't imagine a reason that this matters. Now, as it turns out, it does matter, because if you take any part of the Bible and you don't take it as literally true, then there's a lot of things that fall out from there. But no Christian was willing to tell me that at the time. Like, they weren't willing to say, look, there are so many problems in this book. If we admit to one of them, we're gonna have to admit to a whole bunch of stuff, and your whole Christianity is gonna fall apart, and you're gonna become an atheist. That's why you have to believe that Job is real, because that little thing is holding up all the other things. Like, oh, that's the actual answer. But the answer that I got was, don't ask. You just don't have enough faith. Who do you think you are? You're so prideful. You think you know better than everybody else, and all the other stuff that's supposed to cow you into not asking your questions. So anyway, that shelf, I was never able to turn my attention fully from it. And so one of the things that I point at now, like looking back, trying to figure out, like, when did all this actually start to fall apart? Like I said, there were some conversations. I had a really long conversation with my mom when I was like 7 or 8, about the historicity of Jesus. And like, I just couldn't figure out, like, but how do you know? Like, you've got this couple books here, and I didn't know that there were no other books that have any mention about Jesus. I just, it just didn't make sense to me. Like, so a guy, like, God became a human, and then like just ignored physics for 3 years. And like, this didn't like have a more monumental like, shouldn't we have? And if he was willing to do that and like make himself known, why wouldn't he do that again? Well, because he doesn't want us to be automatons. That would make it too easy to believe in him. Then we would have to have faith. But then why did he destroy the faith for all those people? Like, none of those people apparently were able to believe in Jesus, because Jesus was too powerful then. So so things like this, like, it didn't make sense to me. And she, tried to go into the historicity of, like, how do we even know Abraham Lincoln was really alive? Like, we trust the historians, and all that stuff. But I remember leaving that conversation realizing the real problem here is that I'm not accepting the answer that I'm supposed to accept. And there was like there's a passion about it that was unlike the other conversations. If I had asked her, how do we know Abraham Lincoln ever lived, then it would have been, I don't think it would have been a memorable conversation. But this one had like an intensity that was like, no, you have to, you really need, your eternal salvation depends on you accepting my answer to this question. And so anyway, there were some conversations like that along the way. But then in 2010, apparently, I went back to this blog that I started called it wasn't, if I'm really honest, finding God despite religion. And it was some of the like safer questions on the shelf. Like, I really want to believe in God, but I can't bring myself to call a God loving who would send someone to hell for not thinking that the story of Job was literally true. Like, if you had lived a perfect life, except you're like, I don't know about Job. Job seems like maybe that was just a story. And then he's like, hell forever. like that doesn't seem like a good guy. And so it's just like some of the safer ones like that. So I have to believe that in 2010, and that blog got me into a lot of trouble with my dad and in the surrounding community. But like I apparently felt it enough at that point that I was willing to put it on the internet and endure the pain of like, are you sure you're really a Christian and all the other stuff that came with that. So somewhere before 2010, I was really starting to be troubled by some of the stuff. So I
So
don't
it
know.
sounds to me, at least based on the conversation you just described with your mom, that what kept you then for all the years is the same thing that keeps the rest of us. It's fear.
Sure. Yes, and appeal to authority. Like I'm 7. What do I know? Like of course my mom's right. I just all the things like when I ask her how do we know 2 plus 2 is 4, she can show me, and then that makes sense to me, and I'm like, oh, I get it. That makes sense. In this other conversation, all I can say is, oh, I get it. I can't say that makes sense because it doesn't
Right.
make sense.
Right.
So like I'll obey, and I trust you know what you're talking about. Your mom, you know everything. I'm a 7-year-old. I just can't bring myself to say that makes sense because it doesn't make sense yet. Do you want to say some more words? Because I'm still ignorant. So I don't know that it was fear as much as it was just like honesty. Like
Right.
I trust you.
If she were to say to you, instead of saying you have to believe this because your eternal life depends on it, which is a fear tactic, if she were
Sure.
to say, well, this is what I think, and you know that it might not make sense to everybody, and it's not going to affect your eternal life or your life in general. You can believe whatever you want. Do you think you would have?
Yes.
You think you would have just still believed it?
I probably. I mean, I was in that community. I was 7. I all my
Yeah.
friends were church friends. She was a pastor's wife. So she needed desperately to also for all this stuff to be true. And I didn't. It wasn't causing me any problems.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't think I would have thrown off my religion. I probably would have deconstructed it at a much earlier age,
That's what I'm imagining. Yes, that's what
but
I
not
think.
at 7. I doubt. Like I didn't really
Sure.
care.
No,
Like
sure. Well, of course. I
Santa
mean,
Claus could be real.
by then the brainwashing had already taken effect. I mean, you can't like one. I mean, as a child, once that's in there, it's integrated, and
Mhm.
you don't have the developed mind yet to be able to reason yourself out of something at that age.
Mhm.
So I agree
Maybe.
with you. I mean that does make sense. I mean they catch you early, and that's why statistics show that the prime time to reach people and turn them into Christians is when they're children. I mean,
Yep.
you know, if you miss that, you might still get them at teenage years, but you know
Yeah.
after that, forget about it. You know, it's
Right.
really hard. So yeah, I mean that takes effect, and especially if you're raised in a Christian home and that's your culture, you go to church
Yeah.
every week. It's not like we had the opportunity. It's not like our parents said, "All right, now for the next 3 weeks, you're going to go and spend time with some atheists."
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
It's not like you got that opportunity to experience life outside of Christianity. That's just all
Right.
we knew.
Yeah.
It's literally all we knew.
Yeah.
So why
Well,
would we deconvert? Yeah,
yeah. And to throw on top of that, like I was also homeschooled, and my parents were both like in the so I was just like that was my whole world. All of my friends, all of my school, all of my
absolutely.
church. There wasn't a single aspect of my community that was outside of the Christian world. There was one lady from the school that would the nearby school that would come check on us like once a month, but she might have been one of the only non-Christians that I knew. So everyone else was in my church. So
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. And so I mean, you live in this, and it really is a matrix. You live in this matrix in this world where everything
mhm.
is about God, and you just don't ever consider any other alternative. Even though you
Yeah.
have these questions, they're more, and this is what I was trying to explain earlier, they're more just questions you have to solve within that matrix, not something that's solved outside of the matrix.
Mhm.
You still think there's an answer in here, and there
Yeah.
has to be because this is the
Sure.
only option.
Yes.
And that's the way I felt too. And so
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, like when you're raised like that, bro, it's so hard to think outside that box. It's tough.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so all right, so those are some of your progressive thoughts and stories, and so eventually at 39, like I'm
Yeah.
sure you have plenty more
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
experiences and stories, right?
Mhm.
And I love them. I want to hear more of them. I do.
Mhm.
I don't know how much time you have, um,
Yeah.
but dude,
There's a lot of them.
it's just 39 years is a long time, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have so many, but let's get to 39.
Yeah.
You say you have this conversation with your dad,
Yep.
and you haven't had a relationship with your family for 5 years, 6 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bro, my heart breaks for you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, uh, that would be a very, very, very long story. Of course, it's relationships and it's family and it's all complicated. I so we weren't surprised by it at all. To make a really long story short, um, at 17, I told there's a Christian school on the campus of the church. It was Freedom Christian School. My mom was a principal, so my dad was a pastor of the church. My mom was a principal of the school. At 17, when I was graduating, I told my girlfriend, "Hey, I'm gonna go. I'm going to go to San Diego because something's up here. I don't know what it is. And maybe all these people are right, but something seems really wrong here. And I know I'm not going to be able to find out what it is as long as I'm here. I got to get out." But that was a secret that I didn't tell anybody except for my girlfriend. And so that was my plan, was like, go find out what the world is really like, and maybe go find out I was just really actually arrogant and all the things, and that this was the perfect place, and I left a utopia, and now I'll be able to appreciate it more when I come back, having left and gone to hell. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I don't have any objective perspective while I'm here. So I told her I'm moving to San Diego. She said please don't, and she's my girlfriend, so I didn't. So anyway, I stuck around, but I, at least since the age of 17, had a feeling like this place was, and this had nothing to do with my theology or Christianity or whatever. This was just like, something's weird around here, because it was a cult. And so, I mean, it was a good, fine Christian church. It was run as a cult. I think that the cult aspect of an organization has to do with the power that you give to it and the power that it allows you to give to it, and the relationship that you have to it, not necessarily its theology. So you don't have to be like, you don't have to have a suicide pact in order for it to be a cult. But if you go to your therapist and you're like, what should I do this weekend? And she's like, I think that you should hang out with so-and-so, you're in a cult. So as soon as you're giving power to someone and they're accepting that power over your life.
Yeah, no problem here, man. No, you can call it a cult.
Yeah. Okay. Right. But I just want to distinguish that, because I don't think the theology was the theology of a cult. What made it a cult was the way that my parents were willing to interact with people and control their lives. And our theology was just regular, plain Christian. So if you go to the church, then, oh, it's a good Christian church, why would you call it a cult? In my mind, the religion has nothing to do with the relationship. But anyway, this short story is getting long. So I knew since my teen years, something's up here, something's weird. Anyway, my girlfriend, now my wife, is eternally supernaturally optimistic, I think would be fair to say, even though I don't believe in supernatural. So she always hoped that, like, okay, but maybe you're just seeing it wrong and maybe this can all work out. And anyway, so we did that dance for a long time until we started having kids. And then as they got older, we realized, oh, these guys are going to get chewed up by this system, and it's just a matter of time until they do something that's against the rules, and then the cult's going to tell them all these horrible things about themselves, and they're going to carry that with them for the rest of their years. And we see all the people who have exited with trying to deal with their trauma from this cult. So we got to get out of here before our kids get old enough to run it up against the system. Unfortunately, of course, at that point we were in the cult. So that means that our jobs were both at the church and school, that our home loans, our cars, our everything was tied up there. That was our community. That was our income. That was our babysitters. That was our 100% of our lives was that. And so, and you can't just say, hey, we want to, we don't want to be a part of the cult anymore, because then you instantly lose everything. And so then we kind of like had to strategically go, okay, so over the next year, we're going to try to pay off this and pay them back for this. And then we're going to try to, we're going to try to find one extra babysitter. So we mostly use babysitters from the group that you're allowed to, but then we have one other babysitter that we sometimes use. We're going to try to, get out of the cars, and then I'm going to change jobs. And when I changed jobs, that was a huge thing. Like, my dad came over to my house when I told him that I wasn't going to be teaching at the school anymore, which paid, like, I forget, it was like $25,000 a year. It was something like probably illegal to pay us. But anyway, so he came over, and he like looked me in the eyes. He's like, I just want you to tell me that you want to destroy your kids' lives. That's your goal here. You're fine to leave the school and not teach her anymore. I just need you to tell me that you want to destroy my grandkids' lives. So that was rough. And I thought at that point that was like a We everything might have ended at that point. We weren't sure, but we were ready at that point if like there was no other way out of this thing. So anyway, 5 years of planning to like inch by inch like get unattached from this place so we could eventually say, and now we're going to attend a different church, and not lose everything that we had. So anyway, by the time we actually got to that point and we were as detached as possible and we like pulled the trigger and I had the meeting, it wasn't a huge surprise that he that they treated us the way that they did, which they would say was gracious and loving, as they have always treated everybody who ever left that place. So
But you guys are family though. Like that's not even the same thing.
there's no such thing. Don't be silly. There's the family of God.
That's
Uh, there's biology. Like I'm biologically, like my DNA is more a percentage to them, but like we're almost as close to bananas as we are to each other. Like that has nothing to do with it. The family of God is what really matters.
oh my God,
So
dude.
yeah, if you're not going to be one of God's children anymore, then you're not going to be one of my children anymore. Like I don't have a choice over that. You're making that choice. You're deciding not to be in the family of God, and that saddens my heart that you're going to spend eternity in eternal torment. But I
Wow,
got
dude.
a
That's so
calling.
sad. That's so sad. Like I did not have that same experience, and I'm so sorry for you. Like, fortunately, my family is not like that. Like
Yeah.
they definitely think I'm going to hell,
Hmm.
and they definitely
Right.
think that I made the wrong choice, but they definitely chose family over religion when it came to that. Like
Yeah.
as long as we just made a pact that we're not going to talk about it. It's just not
Mm.
a conversation piece for us,
Yeah.
and we're still family. I'm not saying this to rub it in your face. I'm saying I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry to hear what you're going through. Like that breaks my heart, dude. That's sad. I'm
Yeah.
so glad I don't have to deal with that, dude. That's so
Yeah.
so like you haven't talked to your parents in 5 years, 6 years?
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'm just speaking for myself here, not anyone else who's gone through what I've gone through. So I'm not trying to minimize anyone else's experience, but I hadn't really talked to them in a lot of years before that. I didn't really
Okay.
lose a brother or a mom or a dad because I never really had one. And I knew that from really, really young.
Okay.
Um, so like I don't know if you've seen, there was this moment, oh, it's so embarrassing, but in the Black Widow movie where they're like they had their family union or whatever, but they weren't really a family. And then
Right.
they regather together, and all of them are like, "What are you talking about, family? Like we were a unit. We were sent out into the field as a unit, but we weren't really a family." Um, and like that, like I wept bitterly at that scene because like
Huh.
that's what that I that was so much my experience of like God sent this group of like Jamin and his brother and his mom and his dad out to save the world. And that's all that we were. We were never a family. So we said family and stuff, but it was largely so that we could look like a family so that um, people would think that we were a good family. So they would be drawn into the family of God because that's all that really mattered. It's not like if you were, I assume, if you were to lose your family, it wasn't a loss like that. It was like it's I keep going to these movies. It's like the Mission
This is
Impossible.
fun. I like the movies. Go ahead.
It's like the Mission Impossible movies where like your mission goes sideways and then like you're disavowed, right? Like you always knew you were disposable, and I always
Right.
knew I was disposable that way. Like, okay, so the mission went sour, and now you're on your own, back to some other civilian life.
Huh.
And so I don't have the same grief that I think other people have on my behalf. It's sad to me, but I've been sad for decades that I didn't have a brother. Like I could never. Maybe this is a normal experience. So again, I'm coming from this weird cult world, but I never could get him to the point of the Job thing. Like if I brought that up, that would always be troubling to him. Like okay, but like doesn't it seem weird that you'd go to hell forever for not whatever it was? Like I just couldn't have a conversation and have him go, yeah, we don't see it the same way, but I can see what you're talking about. Like he was all I don't know. I just never had someone that was like I never felt like I had a brother.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so I don't know. Maybe, yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't a loss in the same way. So
That makes sense. I can understand what you're saying. Okay. So, wow. All right. So you're
it
just
was I will
basically
sorry,
like,
I will interject this. It was sad in that like it was like when you have someone who's a family member who's really sick and they finally pass, like this isn't ever coming back. Like there was that grief. So it wasn't like it was not sad for me, but it just wasn't surprising. Like this relationship had been sick for a long time and it finally died. And so there was definitely grieving, and I'm still sad about it. And I would still love to talk to them every day. I think about them multiple times a day, and I'm still sad about it. But it's more like I wish I would have had a family, and more than it is, I'm sad that I lost my family, something like that.
That makes sense. Wow. So, how much of your unit life, family
Yeah.
life,
Uh
um, impacted what you wrote in your book, Dear Evangelicals?
huh. How do you mean that? Can you ask it a different way?
Meaning, is in some way, did you write it in hopes that your family might read it and you
Uh,
targeting them?
yes. Also embarrassing to admit. Absolutely, 100%. That's probably what it is. It's
Yeah.
it's probably a pleading, more for my former friends from that community than my family, because I think my family's more lost than they are, just because I don't know them well enough to know how much they truly hate me. And my family I've known for a long time. But yeah, it's definitely like a pathetic wish that they would see me and hear me. But also, like, I went into it knowing that, like, in the same way that, like, currently I can't not be a Christian. Like, even though I'm an atheist, like, I'm still a Christian. Like, I just know that's in me. Like, I can't get the songs out of my head or whatever it is. I can't get the verses to like not pop up as I go through life. In the same way, I just knew as I was writing, like, I'm trying to write this book that doesn't have anything to do with this, but I know that this is deep in me. So yeah, like, for anyone who would accuse me of what just writing to like get their attention, or like somewhere in the universe, like, have be accepted and loved by them, that's probably true. Uh, but it also, like, I tried to write it with that in mind and put that to the side and just write a really good book. So yeah,
Sure. Well, and I completely empathize with you because I I had the same feeling when I was writing my book. Like,
yeah.
I mean, my immediate friends and family were the main concern in my heart. So
Mhm.
most certainly when I wrote this book, I had them in mind. I absolutely, like, I want them to read this more than anything so that they can at least understand where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
truly grasp me, and see if they can get an understanding of what they think is what they think,
Yep.
because it's not even remote. But sadly, the only people on the planet that seemingly will not read the book I wrote for them is the
Yeah.
people I wrote for them.
Right.
They
Yep.
just have no interest. So
Yeah, man.
it's
I'm sorry.
it's sad. Yeah, it's sad. It's just there's just no interest in that. So, but it's okay. It'll benefit the rest of the world, and that's what can you do? But at
Yep.
least they'll have that personal touch, and
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and that's powerful.
Well,
Um,
and it's also cool to like have that experience and know that all the books that you've read until then have also, like, all the books I've read about people who've left cults. Like, I know now that while they were writing that, they were writing about their story, but those people from that cult were also in the back of their mind, either like criticizing them or like calling them or whatever. Like, there's that whole relationship. So now I read that story, and before I just read it as like, oh, here's a person who's telling the truth about their experience, and now I know it's really more, it's a lot of their relationship with that experience than it is like just a straight narrative, like, you know um I don't know, whatever fiction novel's been written, Moby Dick or something like that. It's not a straight telling. It's got a lot of emotion tied up in it.
oh yeah, no, definitely a lot of emotion. Wow, that's yeah. Dude, I love your story, man. It's so intriguing and so powerful, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us
Thank
because
you.
this is it's a lot of personal stuff here, and
Yeah.
your willingness to share this with the world is so powerful for some people because I'm here to tell you there's a lot of people that want out. They know something's up,
Yeah.
but they just don't. The fear of losing this community that they think can only be found in Christianity
Yeah.
is so gripping.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and currently, unfortunately, in some ways, it is the only place you're going to find that kind of community. Um,
Right. Yes. Well, you
but
can go to a different cults. There are lots of different brands of
there's
cults.
a lot of different cults you can go to. That's true. But my hope is that you don't leapfrog from this one to the next one, because that's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
My opinion is that, and I, this is a statement I use a lot, and I wrote it in my book: as theism dies, humanism will rise.
Hmm.
And I think that right now, theism has capitalized on the market
Yeah.
for fellowship, so to speak.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
very difficult to create those environments when the church is as powerful as it is. So,
Yes.
I think that if we were to be able to do the Avengers snap
Thanos.
finger
Yeah. Uh-huh.
thing, and eliminate religion altogether, and then overnight we had to figure out what we were going to do, I think we would come together, and I think we would build a society where we would have the same type of community that we had in churches, just minus
Yeah.
the religious aspect to it.
Right.
But like you said, it's not going to happen overnight. So I think a lot of people dread
Yeah.
losing all that they're going to lose, and the fear of also what is this unknown that I'm entering into.
Yeah.
So you sharing your
Right.
story is so helpful, man, and I really
Yeah.
appreciate it, because people need to see that none of us just left thinking, oh, who needs that anymore? This
Yeah.
is stupid. Like life's going to be so easy. Dude, it wasn't like that. Like, for
Yeah.
me, it was easy to wake up and be like, okay, that's definitely not right anymore. But bro, it brought so much pain and
Yeah.
a sadness, and not
Yeah.
because of me leaving, but because I was brainwashed into it to begin with.
Yep.
And that's just hard for people to realize. What's going to happen if I leave this thing? You're
Yeah.
going to hurt. That's what's going
Yeah.
to happen. You're going
Yep.
to hurt. There's no
Yeah.
there's no way about it. No other way about it. You're going to hurt.
Right.
But I can promise you that it may take 3, 4, 5 years,
Hmm.
but on the other side, there's healing, and you will find people like Jamin and I that can honestly tell you it was worth it.
Yeah. Yes. And to piggyback on that, like I wouldn't wish for anyone to have to go through that. Um, I could say, having gone through it, the people that I have as friends now, I don't have any fear that they're going to leave, and they might. Like, I don't have any power over them, but they were the few that were willing to treat me like a human, regardless of what they thought of my thoughts, regardless of my theology or my philosophy, or regardless of my darkest days and my most embarrassing moments. They were there for me, and I didn't have that. Like, if you're afraid that you're going to lose your community, I would say there's probably a good chance that you're right. Like, you have that fear for a reason, but also that's going to be your only community, is as a community that you're afraid of losing, unless you say and do and act all the right ways. Until you actually say and do and act in some wrong ways, like, you're not going to find out who your real friends are. So I would not recommend going through this just to, like, weed out all your bad friends. But one, I would affirm the fear. The fear is probably real that you would lose that community. But also, like you're saying, there's another community that is so much more stable that you don't have to worry about losing them. And I think the only way that you get there is by losing the other ones that you're afraid of losing. So I don't know if that made any sense, but
Dude, that made so much sense. Like, I have never heard it put that way, bro. That was brilliance.
hmm,
I actually think I need to incorporate what you just said into my book, my new, because I hadn't even thought of it like that. You're so right. If you have that fear, there's a reason you have that fear. Like,
yeah,
oh my goodness, dude, that's so insightful.
yeah,
So insightful. And
yeah,
like,
cool,
it's almost like the question, when you ask your kids, growing up, do you really want to be friends with that crowd that's
right,
gonna make you feel like that? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
wow, dude.
Well, I think
That
if you look into other cults, you can see it. Like, someone who's in Scientology, someone who's in Mormonism, like, they would state their fears to a Christian, and a Christian would be like, "Yeah, you're probably going to lose those friends." Like, but also, if you stay there, those are going to be your only friends forever. Like, don't if you jump out, it's going to hurt, like you're saying. But also, the community that you don't have to fear losing only exists once you leave Scientology, once you leave Mormonism. And there might be, like, I have Christian friends who still accept me, and we kind of have the same deal. Like, I don't say things that are offensive to them. And and I guess they still all say all the same stuff to me, but whatever, I'm cool with it. But like those it doesn't mean that all of, like 100% of your Scientology friends you're going to lose, but also if until you're willing to lose 100% of your Scientology friends, those are going to be the only friends you have.
And also, you're going to be living by somebody else's standards and what they want instead of what
Yes.
you want, right? So that's the cost analysis you have to face: is, do I still want to live by somebody else's rules just to maintain a community with people that I'm afraid to lose because they will turn their back on me if I choose to live a different way? Like, wow, what a trap! That is such a
Yeah.
trap. Like, you're in a prison. Do you realize how much of a prison that is? Like, bro, the way you just explained that, I never even saw it that clearly, but that is
Hmm.
such a prison, dude.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great insight, man. I appreciate that. Whoa. Bro, if there's anybody listening, if there's nothing else to take from this, take that, because that was absolutely insightful. Um, so I want to transition to one last thing before we
Yeah.
take off, but I want to make sure that before I transition, because it's completely disconnected to anything we talked about.
Cool.
But I want to give you a chance to like say anything else you want to close that conversation out before I do that.
No, if you think I said something insightful, let's end there. This is great.
Let's not ruin the moment, right? All right,
Drop the mic.
great.
That's good.
No, that's I was going to end right there. I don't even know what I said, but I'm going to end it right there. So, real quick, just something about you. I noticed in the background, you
Mhm.
clearly are a musician.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Well, I
you talked
clearly
about that a
own
little
musical
bit.
things. I
What's
don't
that?
know I clearly own musical things. I don't know if that makes me a musician.
Well, I mean, I would imagine you play these things,
I
right?
do. I do.
So, tell us a little bit about. Do you have anything we can look at? Do you record
Oh,
anywhere? Do you?
no. It's all for me personally. I do teach music mostly
Okay.
online. And that's been a common thread throughout my story. And there's a little bit of a story because I was a worship pastor, which I have to clarify for all the true Christians out there who get mad at me for calling myself a pastor of 20 years or whatever. I wasn't a real pastor. I was just a worship pastor.
Oh, good grief. Yeah, I wasn't a real pastor as a youth pastor either, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Cool. Um, so, that music definitely weaves its way through my story as well. But no, it's just something that I enjoy right now, and so I don't record things or sell things really. If you want to learn music, then I enjoy. I'm more of a so I enjoy music. I enjoy playing music for me, and have no aspirations to tour. Or I did enough recording and touring to know that I don't like that. And so, but then I really love teaching. That's my favorite thing. And so, whether it's history, math, I was a fifth and sixth grade combo teacher for 6 years in a classroom, and currently teaching in a school K through 12. So I really love teaching whatever it is. And I also happen to love music, and so I end up teaching a lot of music. But no, there's no way to like support me through my music or anything. So, or to listen to it really, unless you catch my live streams that I do. So yeah.
Oh, so there are live streams.
Yes, I've got a YouTube channel, Learn Piano Live, and learnpianolive.com is my website where I teach online. So yeah, you can see me playing a lot of music. If you just search up my name, it'll be like a lot of like cult stuff, and then religion stuff, and then music stuff. So you'll get to see me playing there. But yeah, it's just a hobby.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Jamin Coller, thank you so much for your time, for sharing with the world your story. I think it's such a wonderful opportunity to help people in their journey. So, thank you, my
Thank you.
friend. I look forward to talking with you further in the
Yeah,
future.
absolutely.
Yeah, have a great day, buddy.
Thanks a lot. You too.